Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Entrepreneur Motivation Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bello, and today I've got Kevin Palmieri with me. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so very much for having me, Chris. I cannot wait to dive deep and see where we go.
Yeah, I should have hit record 20 seconds earlier because we were having some good conversation before. But I actually just spoke with your co-host of your podcast, the Hyper Conscious Podcast, just yesterday. I know there's going to be a little bit of a lag between the release day of both those episodes, but it's kind of cool to talk to one guy and now talk to the other just to see what other perspectives we have. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, we love to go on shows separately because we mesh really well together in our show and speeches and coaching and that sort of thing, but we have very different perspectives. So I always love to either go on before or after Alan just to see the difference in, especially the host and what they say. Usually they say, if Alan goes on first, they say you have big shoes to fill in, and I try to make them laugh more because that's kind of my jam. So
yeah, you're like, okay, I'm going to have to be funnier, I guess.
Right. Because he's definitely smarter for sure.
But it's like really all of us are so different, and we're a combination of our experiences and our past, and we all have different paths and schools we've gone to. I've traveled quite a bit. I think Al and I were talking about that yesterday a little bit, where your perspective really changes every time you go to another country and you meet people from, like when you're in a hostel somewhere, and this is like before coronavirus. Like, remember we used to travel like back in the day and sleep in a hostel with 8 random people? Those were the days. But when you do that and you find people are like from Australia and from Canada and from, like, I was in Thailand and I found a guy who's 3-hour drive from me in Texas. I'm like, what are the odds? And he went to a University of Texas, which is like pretty popular school in Austin. And in such a small place, you can meet people that are so different and so similar to you as well. Right. So
it's being open too.
Yes. Being very open.
For the longest time, Alan and I, we used to be really good friends. Grew up in the same town, went to the same high school, literally played spin the bottle in his basement when we were in like whatever grade. I don't remember what grade it was. But
it was like 4th grade, 3rd grade we played that, right?
It might have been. But we're so different. And the fact that we appreciate that about one another actually makes us a far better team, because a lot of his strongest points are my biggest weaknesses. A lot of his biggest weaknesses are my strengths. And we have this thing called the Drive to 5. I don't know if Alan talked about that with you, but basically, what we found from coaching and studying people is most people start on an extreme. So they're either really insecure or they're arrogant. So I was the insecure one. So we say 0. Alan was arrogant at 10. The goal is to drive to 5.
Okay.
So if you're
be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So you're balanced. Like, you don't know, but you're okay with it. You're open to asking for advice versus being too scared or not feeling like you deserve a coach, or being on the other end and saying like, I don't need a coach. I know everything already. Right. So everything that we do is based on like driving to 5. That like 5 is truth. It's where your perception of self is no higher than what self is. It's accurate. And if you can get there, that's when like life really starts to happen. That's what hyperconscious is. It's understanding why things are the way they are.
That's awesome. So drive to 5. I love that, because usually it's like, okay, 0 to 10. I want to be 10. I want to be the best at everything. But here it's like, you really want to be somewhere in the middle, because you're right. It's a balance of being coachable, but also having the security or the self-belief that you can do things that you haven't done before. Yeah. And as you work harder and you prove to yourself, like, I can do this, you take on more, you do more, you believe more. And I guess sometimes with that comes a little bit of ego, right? You're like, okay, you get too big for your britches and you start to think that everything you touch turns to gold. And I guess we've heard stories of people who have had everything and they got too cocky and maybe they lost it in, a downturn or something happens. And so drive to 5, everybody, # drive to 5.
And that's going to happen. Like, for me, we went to a Brendan Burchard event. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I finally fit in. Like, we were talking about deep stuff.
That's awesome.
A bunch of people in my group were like crying when I was telling them my story. And when we got back, I was cocky. I was at like a 10. And Alan he was very low because he got a lot of feedback thinking like, wow, it's going to be really hard to get up on that stage one day. I was happy that I was there. Alan was frustrated that he wasn't on stage.
Right.
Now that again is a drive to 5. But when we got back, I was cocky. Like, do you know who I am? I was just at a Brendan Burchard event. Like, do you have any idea who I am? And Alan was really overwhelmed. Now, you don't stay. Like, you have a default. I did not like the air up towards 10. I cannot stay there. I cannot stay arrogant. It doesn't work for me. So I had a crash, and I ended up back home down towards the lower end. Alan ended up crying it out with me, and we talked about it, and he ended up going back to confident. I truly believe that you have a default. When you're unresourceful, you'll head that way, most likely.
Okay.
When you do something that you did not think was possible, you'll go the other way.
Absolutely.
You'll build towards 5. So, but imagine knowing that, Chris. Imagine knowing like, okay, I did really well here. For the next like week or two, I'm going to be floating around in this luster of air that I've never experienced before. I got to make sure that I still do what I did to get me there. I was cocky walking into a speech. I bombed because I didn't prep like I usually do. Right. And it's terrible. But knowing that and knowing what part of the human condition affects you, it really helps you figure out that game plan and prep for it, and be ready for it.
Absolutely. I felt this as well. I mean, I'm in real estate here in Houston, and there was a time where, okay, I got my license and I was a little bit comfortable with like the process because I worked with an investment company for a year. So I wasn't like completely a noob, but at the same time, I was all on my own. I didn't have the manager or like the owners there to be like, hey, can you check my numbers? Does this look like a good deal? Before I tell someone like, this is a good deal. And so I had to grow into that role. And then most recently, I had a time when I was here alone and I spoke with the seller and he was wanting to list 7 houses with me. And he's like, yeah, Chris, let's go ahead and list these. And, I was acting all confident, like on the phone the whole time, like, yeah, totally. I'll send you the comps. We'll get pictures scheduled. Like, just let me know when you're free. And when we hung up, I was just like, hell yeah. Like, dude, a package of 7. Like, usually it's hard to get just one. And I don't know it all, but I mean, I'm confident and I know I can figure it out. Right. So I had that moment where I was starting to get like to that level 10, like, okay, who doesn't want to work with me? Like, I'm awesome. And then came the fear like the next week where I was like, crap, like, am I ready to handle this? Right. Am I actually going to sell them? Like, those are 2 different things, promising the work and then delivering on it. Right.
Yeah. I think most of that comes from insecurity. Alan and I did an episode literally right before this about humility. People that don't believe in themselves are viewed as humble by default. That's just a safety mechanism.
Yeah.
People who are arrogant are viewed as confident by default. That's another safety mechanism. All it is at the end of the day is the fear of being hurt in some way, shape, or form. That's and true. When you become aware of that, like, at the end of the day, you are your experiences, but you're conditioned to think a certain way, to feel a certain way, to act a certain way. And when you can figure out like, oh, I'm conditioned to not feel enough. That's the way it is. Like, that's the way I feel. You can start taking appropriate action. Or I'm conditioned to think I am God's gift to the earth. Like, that's probably true to some extent, right? But maybe not as much as you're thinking. And then you can start humbling yourself. If you're low on confidence, build yourself up. Like, do that. Focus on the small wins. If you are like the most confident person in the world, you need more humility. You need to be humbled more. You need more challenge. And knowing that, it helps you figure out the game a lot better.
Yeah. And I talked to Alan about this as well. I just recently met with a therapist / coach for the first time, like 2 weeks ago or something. And that's the whole purpose, is that I want someone who can question like, hey, why do you think like that? Because a lot of times we just do stuff without thinking. It's just who we are. It's just that combination of experiences that makes us react in a certain way, or maybe that's how our parents did it and that's what we saw. And so just thinking like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And being hyper conscious, just like your podcast is called. I mean, knowing yourself, like, this is who I am. These are my limitations. This is what I'm afraid of. This is where I think I can succeed. And then starting to work on those things. Right. So
yeah, it's a tough journey, but it's definitely worth it.
Absolutely. So I know I had your bio pulled up here. I wanted to see, I know I should have started off with it, but I was reading through it, and I love your guys' bio because it's like a story. It's like a sales copy almost, right? Like, I remember opening my final pay stub of the year. Did I accomplish my goal of 6 figures? I did, but nothing changed. You were laying in bed and thinking the car doesn't matter, the house doesn't matter. So do you want to dive into a little bit about like, why are you doing what you're doing and what brought you to this point, right?
Yeah.
Like, talk through your bio a little bit, your story.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people end up hitting rock bottom at one point or another in their life. Unfortunately for me, I found out that rock bottom had a basement. That's where my story, I went through the floor. Yeah. And I found out like there's a harder spot to land, believe it or not. So when I was 25 years old, by all outside standards, I had the dream life. I had a sports car, a brand new car. I had the body of my dreams. I had just done a bodybuilding show. My girlfriend was legitimately a model. Like, I had a beautiful girlfriend, a brand new apartment, a high paying job. I had all these things that I think a lot of people think that they want.
They think
But
that's success, right? It's
they think that's
society's
success.
definition of success.
Yes. And after that bodybuilding show, my girlfriend left me because I was insecure. I was broken. I was a shell of myself. I was depressed. When she left, for the first time in my life, I had to look in that mirror and admit to myself, you're not nearly as confident as everybody thinks you are. Everybody thinks you're confident. You're not at all. You're so insecure about all these things. You have a lot of traumas that you've never faced. Like, for the first time ever, I had to sit down, look in the mirror, and admit, you have a lot of work to do. You have a lot of work to do. So that was my first ever dive into personal development. So every night before I went to bed, Chris, I would say these positive affirmations. I am handsome. I am talented. I am worthy. I am a great man. And this year I will make the most money I've ever made in my entire life. Unfortunately, I really locked in on that last one. I really locked in on the money.
Focus on the money, yeah.
And you'll see that is a common theme in my story, unfortunately. So I was a weatherization technician. So we would travel up and down the East Coast of the United States, and we would make state and government buildings more energy efficient. Okay, so we were always on the road. In 2016, so the year after my girlfriend left me, we were traveling all the time. In New Jersey, Connecticut. I live in Massachusetts. So all of that was a good distance from me. So every week I'm in a hotel room, every week, week after week, week after week, week after week. But the pay stubs are really starting to add up. Like, anywhere from $70 to $100 an hour I'm making. And that's amazing for a 26-year-old kid who didn't go to college. Like, sign me up for that. Sign me up for that. So we get to the end of the year. I had been on the road for 10 out of the 12 months, 5 days a week, only home one day, maybe 2 days on the weekend if I'm lucky. And I'm opening that last pay stub, sitting at my kitchen table saying, did I do it? Did I make six figures? 26 before anybody I knew, no college degree. And I opened it up and I did. But I had another gut check moment of nothing changed. You're still not any more confident than you were. You're still insecure. You still haven't dealt with any of this garbage. And I remember going to bed that night. I'm laying in bed. And that's the beginning of the bio. The car doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The girlfriend, having an amazing relationship is very important. But like, if you're basing, my girlfriend's a model, like that doesn't do it. So
right.
It's what's up here. It's what's in your head that matters. It's what you think about yourself. It's all of those things. It's your beliefs. And that is where I was laying there and I was thinking, like, I was unconscious. Like, that's how I was living.
Like,
I was
your
living
whole life, right?
My
up
whole
to that
life.
Point.
I never even knew anything else was an option. And I said, I want to be hyper conscious. And that is where the podcast started. So 2017, I started the show, and the job that made me so much money, that was my passion, making money. It took me away from my new passion, talking about the stuff that really matters, talking about depression, anxiety, relationships, suicide, limiting beliefs, like fulfillment, happiness. It took me away from that. So it got worse and worse. Again, this year was very much like the year prior, where I was just on the road every week, every day, New Jersey, Connecticut, Virginia, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Delaware, all over the place. And I was leaving later and later for work. I would literally leave Massachusetts at 2 a.m., drive 5 hours to New Jersey, work an 8-hour day, and then go to the gym after. And then I would do the opposite on Friday. I would work an 8-hour day, drive 5 hours home, go to the gym. Like, it was miserable, man. It was miserable.
Yeah.
And the money just started to matter less. Like, I was leaving work early. I stopped caring. And the rock bottom basement moment for me, I'm sitting on the edge of the bed in a crusty hotel room in New Jersey. I'm lacing up my work boots. I've done this hundreds of times before, hundreds of times. I think it's a cold winter morning, if I recall correctly. And the best way I can explain it is there was just a dozen televisions playing in my mind at the same time on different channels. One saying you're never going to make it. One saying you're stuck here forever. One saying, this is your life. Like, this is what you have to do. You're going to leave $100,000 on the table. Your family's going to say you're crazy. Your friends are going to think you're crazy. And do you really think you can be a successful podcaster? Like, that was the loudest one. Like, do you really think you're going to quit your job and podcast? And in that moment, I thought the best thing to do would be to end my life, because if I ended my life, I ended my problems. If I went away, things got quiet. And it's a lonely feeling. It's a helpless feeling. It's a hopeless feeling. But I texted Alan. Alan and I were friends. Alan was the personal development guy. He was the guru at the time. So I texted him and he said, like, dude, you need to change, man. Like, you're miserable because of this. and this is what you need to do. And it's like, yeah, all right, man. Like, easy for you to say. Like, you know what I mean? Easy for you. So I didn't do it, obviously, because I'm still here. I worked through understanding, like, I don't think this normal thing is for me. I don't think I want to do this anymore. I don't want to do what everybody else wants. I'm done with it. So I left my job 3 or 4 months later. I went full time into podcasting. I'm a professional speaker. We're about to cross 400 episodes this month. I work one-on-one with businesses and CEOs to grow and scale their podcasts. And I have my own podcast agency now. So things have changed. But at the end of the day, if you're watching or listening, I want this to be the takeaway. I didn't have any belief in myself. Genuinely. I didn't think any of this was possible until I got around people who believed in me. And when I did that, that changed my life just as much as anything else did. So I don't ever want anybody to see this and be like, oh, just because he did that, I could never do it. It's actually the opposite. If I can do this, that means anybody in the world can do this. I'm nothing special. I'm just a kid with a huge dream. I work really hard, but I haven't always. I didn't work really hard until I found something I was willing to die for, honestly. Like 3 years ago, I wanted to take my life, and now I'm giving my life to something greater than me, and it's forcing me to be greater.
Absolutely. And I think Alan said something similar yesterday, is that he wanted to work more. And like, once you find something that you actually love, it doesn't feel like work, like that saying goes. And even Gary Vaynerchuk, I heard him say on one video that how you make your money is more important than how much money you make, right? So would you rather, I know Tim Ferriss, 4-Hour Workweek. I have so many of these ideas that I've had in my head because I read 4-Hour Workweek when I was in a corporate job that I hated. And I started thinking like, man, I got to get out of this cubicle. Literally, there's cubicles. I look up and I can see cubicles everywhere. It's literally the corporate cubicle life. And my monitor's there. Like, anybody who walks by can see what's on my screen and what I'm working on and what I'm doing. And my boss would walk up and I'm like, minimize out of Facebook, but she already caught me, right? I was kind of getting distracted and whatnot, but I didn't want to be there. And one thing in 4-Hour Workweek that I forget the numbers, but it was a question that made me think, like, would you rather make $100,000 a year working 60 hours a week, or like $30,000 a year working 20 hours a week? And like, I thought about it and I'm like, wow, before I would have thought I would have wanted the 100 grand and grinded my way there and work as much as it, takes. And now it's like, I'd be pretty happy at 30 or 40 grand working half the time, because you're making like, a higher dollar per hour. Right. You're generating more value, right? So you're not just trading time for money. And that really started getting me thinking, and like, how do I get out of this? And I mean, I was kind of where you were at too. Solid energy, oil and gas job, good benefits. I got to live in Dubai for 6 months. They paid for everything. Solid experience. But even when I was in Dubai, it's like, I couldn't wait for 4 or 5 o'clock because I wanted to go to the beach and play volleyball. Like, I didn't want to be in the office. So man, I really appreciate that you touched on that, because once you find what you're passionate about, like you said, you have to be willing to give your life forward and like just go all in, and it doesn't feel like work anymore.
Yeah, I love talking about motivation and inspiration, because people say like, I'm not motivated. Of course you're not. You don't like what you're doing. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Are you motivated to go hurt yourself? Like, if you knew you were going to fall down the stairs every day when you woke up, would you be motivated to get out of bed? No. But it makes sense. But rather than fix the root cause, people are like, yeah, but what can I do to get motivated? Right. You can get a better job. Well, yeah. I have like these circumstances. Okay, I understand that. And circumstances are definitely, they're difficult, and your circumstances are different than mine. But what's one thing we could do today to get you closer to happiness, to get you closer to fulfillment? Like, have you even looked at other jobs? Or what are you doing in your spare time? Are you just binge watching Netflix and escaping? Or what if I said, what fulfills you? Like, what lights you up? Oh, I love photography. Okay, let's get you a cheap camera, and you can go take some pictures on Saturday. Your life would already be better. And I just think that I'm not motivated some days. I'm inspired. I'm inspired to do this podcast. I'm inspired to be able to talk to people. I'm inspired to coach people that want to start their podcast. Like, if it was up to motivation for me, I would be playing Call of Duty right now. Straight up. Like, I would. When the camera shifted, I'm sure you saw that there was Call of Duty videos in my YouTube thing. That's what I
couldn't see what it was, but I was like,
I'll give it away. I
figured it was YouTube videos or something, but I didn't know it was all Call of Duty.
It was, because I enjoy it. I enjoy playing. But it's one of those things where, like, if you're always relying on motivation, you're always relying on willpower, you're always relying on forcing it. if you're relying on inspiration, you're pulled. You're pulled to do it. I love to do this, and I do this at my speeches. If I ran up to you, Chris, I shook you on the shoulders and I said, hey, brother, $10. There's a crispy $10 bill with your name on it in that burning building. All you got to do is go in and get it. Like, it's yours. 10 bucks. Are you going in?
Probably not. No.
Probably not. But I run up to you and I grab you by the shoulder and I say, Chris, your family is in that building. There's no money. It doesn't matter. You're not motivated. You're inspired.
Right.
That's it.
You're pulled.
An inspired life is a fulfilled life. An inspired life is a life with purpose. An inspired life is one that you don't run from. Like, imagine designing a life that you don't need a vacation from. That's what lifestyle design is. And when I'm talking to people about that, I'm not just talking about work. I want you to meditate. I want you to journal. Like, I want you to do the stuff that fills you up. Do you want to play Call of Duty for 2 hours a night? Cool. Schedule it in. Like, I do it. I watch 5 hours of UFC on Saturday. I can't tell you not to do that, but that fills me up. And I do think it's that balance. And a lot of people say there isn't balance, but I do think there is. I genuinely do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I remember this was one valuable thing that I got from the corporate role. I remember I was in some program and we got access to like the CEO and the CFO. And this was a huge company, like 50, 60,000 people globally, locations in different countries. And the CFO was talking to the class that I was in. It was like 30 people that were being groomed for upper level management down the road. I mean, 20 years from now or whatever. And little did I know that 3 years in, I'd be like, okay, I'm burnt out of this. I can't do it anymore. I don't want to do it anymore. Not that I can't.
Yes.
But she did make a good point that she said, there's no such thing as work-life balance. Like, you make things work. You might have to go more into the work side sometimes, and then you might have some time where you get to spend more time with family. But going into the lifestyle design that you spoke about, I'm doing that consistently. I time block everything. I just meditated like an hour ago for the second time today. I do it in the afternoon to kind of break up the day as things start to pile up. And you couldn't really do that, back in the day. Or even if I wanted to in the cubicle, it's like, am I going to get judged? What if my boss comes and she thinks I'm sleeping, but I'm meditating? It's just weird. So lifestyle design is huge. And you have to, like you said, time block everything. You want to play Call of Duty? Put it in your calendar. Otherwise, 2 hours turns into 4, and you didn't do that other task that you were supposed to do. So that's extremely important for whoever's listening to time block and follow your calendar.
Yeah, and I think the other, get clear on why you're doing what you're doing. If I jump on the phone with a client and I say, okay, what are you doing tomorrow? And they say, I don't really know. In my opinion, you're already screwing up a little bit, because that means you're living. Yeah, you're living by accident. You're not living intentionally. Living intentionally, genuinely, by definition, means you're living on purpose. Every day you're doing something because you know that's what's best. But that starts with clarity, right? So the fact that you're meditating already insinuates that meditation is benefiting you in some way, shape, or form. So you're willing to set aside 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour a day to do it. But a lot of people, they want the results of lifestyle design, but they haven't decided what they want to design towards yet. So
true.
I always tell people the first step is clarity. Honestly, okay, so I'll give you an example. I just got off before this. I had a podcast consultation with somebody, and I said, what do you want out of your show? And she said, shit, I never thought about that.
Okay. Report it.
Right. And so let's start.
It's going to be what you podcast about.
Right. Let's start there. I cannot add that much, or I would struggle to add that much value to you in terms of the rest of this if you don't know what you want out of this. If you want to be the best in the world at this, it's going to be different than if it's just a hobby or a passion that you want to do on the weekends. So clarity for me is always the most important thing, because it affects everything else that you do after.
Exactly. Sorry, I try to put myself on mute. My dog's barking in the background.
No worries.
But that's super important, what you said there about clarity. And Alan and I talked about this yesterday, of having your perfect day and defining what are your key tasks. Your daily dozen, I think is what we called it. And that's the hardest part when you start doing your own thing. I remember I quit my job and my girlfriend went to work, and we're still dating, but a lot has changed since then. I mean, she moved in with me into my house and whatnot, but a lot's also changed with me in that the first Monday I was off, I was like, well, what do? I guess I'll read a little bit of a book and I'll watch some YouTube videos. And now I know I have my whiteboard of these are my key tasks I have to do every day to lead generate, to push my podcast forward, to reach out to and connect with people like yourselves, to get onto other podcasts, right, to spread my message. And so clarity, that's the word. I might even name that the podcast Clarity today. That's the title.
Dude, it is because you could do all of the things that you feel are right, but if they're not for the right thing, they're wrong.
So
and I
true.
think that's where a lot of people are. And so a great example of that is the success, quote unquote, success that both you and I found. That was wrong. We were unclear on the success that we wanted. We thought it was whatever it was, and it wasn't. And I think that's why a lot of people, they find success and they realize that's not what they want. And then they go through the process again and they find their thing because they realized that you can see clearly. You can see clearly after you find what you think you want and you realize it's not the thing. You have clear eyes to look again. And that's when, we've interviewed, and you have too, I'm sure, so many people who had that rock bottom moment of wanting to end their life or losing their house or having somebody hurt or being hurt themselves. And they were able to see clearly what they really wanted. And once you have that clarity, then it's up to you on whether or not you do what you have to do. But clarity's first.
And I've built my life, I guess, in a way where I've never really had, my parents aren't super wealthy, but I never had to want for anything, had a good education, had food on the table, got some toys that I wanted, at Christmas time and whatnot. So I know Gary Vee also talks about this, where the people who have too much, they complain that they're not hungry enough because they've had such a good life that they don't want to push themselves because they don't have to. And then the people who've had it really rough and, were hungry, they kind of have that chip on their shoulder. Like, my life was so much harder than yours. You'll never understand. Right. So for me, that's one of the most challenging parts, is to create that hunger and that drive. I don't have kids. I have, like I said before the call, I've got 2 cats and a dog. So I want to make sure I can provide and have food and wet food and treats for them and stuff, because that stuff gets expensive too. And then my girlfriend as well, right? I don't want to tell her, hey, we can't go on that trip this year because I didn't do enough work in my real estate business. So creating that why, I have a little picture here. Let's see. I created a little why collage almost, where it's a little template of my family, my girlfriend and I, and then traveling, and then my 2 cats and my dog, right? So I tried to create something. So every morning when I look at my why and I'm like, hey, this is why I need to do well today and push transactions closer to closing, where I get paid and I help clients find or sell a house, and I get paid in return for that, so that I can do these things and provide for my family and splurge a little bit, right? So creating that inner fire, do you have any suggestions on how to do that? How does one identify their why? Do they start with the family? Does it depend?
It depends. There's different whys. There's why, and then there's why power. So there's the 4 M's of motivation by Tai Lopez. So it could be mating. So if the opposite sex really motivates you, it could be materials, possessions. I really want that car. It could be freedom, movement/freedom, the ability to go anywhere in the world, or it could be mastery/status, being the best in the world. That's one level of motivation. That's a why, but why power is different. I think when you align with what you should be doing, then that is your why power. You're inspired. But I would say a couple things. If you don't have a family, you're going to eventually, maybe. If you don't want that, okay, there has to be something greater than yourself. If you want to do better than you're doing, sign up for something greater than you. And for me, one of them is my girlfriend. I talk about her on stage. I cry every single time. When I'm down, she's the reason I keep going. I will not fail her. It's that simple. It's that simple. But I also, when I started this podcast, I wanted to kill myself. That is always here. That is always on my shoulder of nothing was ever given to me. I've earned a lot of the stuff I have, but my goal is to be the person that I needed. I don't ever want to be something I'm not. I have to. It's not even that I want to. I have to be that person. That's what I signed up for. I will die before I quit this. It's not, I've never quit tattooed on my arm. I can't. You know what I mean? I physically can't. I can't. But if you're struggling with that, you have to find that motivation, that inspiration elsewhere. Maybe perspective. And I'm sure you've gotten this as a podcaster. We've interviewed people who are paralyzed and changing the world. We've interviewed people who were, Anthony Trucks, a good friend of ours, he was in the NFL. he was passed around from foster family to foster family. He had to chase chickens and sleep in a chicken coop in order to eat. He was forced to lick the bottom of people's shoes until his tongue was bleeding. Like, that guy has every single reason not to be successful. And he is one of the most humble, nicest guys you'll ever meet. So like, sometimes you have to find perspective in other people. That's another way to do it. Like, maybe you don't have the perspective. Maybe you never really struggled. Honestly, use that to your benefit. Maybe help people who have struggled. Right. But I think it's about finding perspective, especially now where like most of us don't want for anything that much. Like, we have this $1,000 phone in our pockets at all time that can
$20 a month, right? Finance.
Right, that can do amazing things. Like, we're on a podcast right now. You're in Texas?
Texas.
Like, with HD video and audio, it's
in real time and no lag. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And right now, I think, during COVID and what's going on with all this racial inequality, that's giving people a lot of like rock bottom moments of like, we're playing at a more level playing field in terms of emotions, in terms of everybody. When COVID happened, everybody was on the same playing field. Like, guess what? You're stuck at home, figure it out. And what's going on with all this racial inequality and all that's going on is that people are forced to take a look in the mirror now and figure out, what do you really stand for? Like, that's something to lean into as well. Like, a lot of people are hurting. It's our job to stand up for that. So I think that's the other thing too, is like, sometimes your purpose, not sometimes, more often than not, your purpose is going to be greater than you are anyway.
So true. I have a quote here on my vision board from Elon Musk, and it says, when something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor. And I don't know if he actually said it or not. I just found it online and it sounded cool. So
if it's online, it's real.
If it's online, it's real, right? Just like our podcast and everything. Right. It's got to be true if we say it, right?
Exactly.
So 98% accuracy rate, maybe 99%. But yeah, I really love that quote, because when something's important enough to you and you have to actually just do it, like I've said this before on podcasts, I got home late from traveling a couple times, and like I get home at 10 or 11 and I'm tired and I had to drive 5-6 hours or whatever. And my mom checks in, hey, you got home okay? You're safe? Yeah. I'm like, I got to record a podcast. And she'd be like, you really have to? Like, you can do it tomorrow, right? And I'm like, no, because I said to myself, I'm going to release episodes every Monday at 6 a.m. Central. And now I actually add it on Thursdays. But like, it's no one's there to watch me. If I uploaded it 2 hours late, like no one would really know, would they? But maybe there would be that listener who drives to work and they listen to my podcast. And because I didn't have it, now they had to go switch to another one and they didn't get my message that they needed that week, right?
And that even goes back to clarity. You decided in advance the kind of person
what was important to me.
Right. Yeah. And I think this is what happens with a lot of people. They say it when they're motivated and then they stop doing it. And like, you have to decide, the second you said that I'm going to drop an episode every Monday at 6 a.m., that version of you was created somewhere. It's now your job not to screw it up. Like, that's what happens. It's now your job to do the things that version of Chris would do. Show up. Like, it's your job now to show up. If you keep showing up the way you should, you'll get the results that you want. But it's the times where it's hard. Like, I like to say, I don't do things, or I don't care that you do things when they're hard. I care when you do things like when they're especially hard. Like, I did it even though it was hard. No. You should do the things like specifically when they're hard. Because that's what separates you from old you. That's what separates successful you from unsuccessful you. Alan and I said early on, we will never miss an episode, ever. And we've never missed an episode in 400 episodes. We've uploaded in the airport. I uploaded in the gym parking lot with a hotspot. Like,
I've done that too.
Right. But the only reason is because you're committed. Right. And you have to do that to stay in congruence with who you are as a person. And that's because you decided.
Exactly. And I love what you said. You had like a tattoo that said never quit or something. Yes.
Never
there
quit.
It is. Never quit. And I've said something similar on a previous episode. It's like, hey, I'm going to create a podcast every single week unless I'm on my deathbed and I can't speak for some reason or whatever, right? It's going to be, and I've done it in Bali, in the hotel. I just recorded in the bathroom. It's super echoey, where you can hear party music in the background, but it's still something that becomes so important to you and you prioritize it, right? Like, are you the type of person, or do you want to be the type of person who says you're going to do something and you don't do it? Or do you want to be the type of person that you can hold accountable because you know that you're going to keep the promises you make to yourself.
Yeah. It's a different life.
It is.
It's a different life. And the thing is, like, if you're watching or listening to this and you're saying like, I would never do that for something, you probably just haven't found it yet.
Right.
Like if you're a parent and I'm not, so this is one of those times where I tell you, I don't know, but
you're assuming,
I'm assuming if you're a parent and something happens to your child, you'll do whatever it takes to get there.
Yeah.
We just
if
decided,
you're a good parent.
Right. Yes, that's true. And we've just decided in advance, that's what this is to us. Like, I'm very committed. I want to be the best in the world at this. So either I do what it takes or I don't get the result. Either one is fine. But like for me, I traded everything for this. So I have to keep doing what it takes. And it's the discipline. It's the consistency. Now is the hardest time ever because we have these things with all these messages all the time attached to us.
Distractions. Mine's face down because I'm scared to see what's on my phone.
Mine was too.
Same thing. I got a full phone of notifications.
And
texts.
If you can overcome that, you're already further along than 80% of people because this is distracting. Like we have the most,
like their lives are controlled by those phones.
Yeah, we have the most opportunity, but that also means you have the most distraction. Like you can do anything on here, anything. Now, I say it in that way, anything, because you can also change the world with your phone, right? If you work hard enough, you can hear this podcast on the phone. You can hear our podcast. You can watch.
You can make a podcast.
You can do all sorts. You can design things. It's a very interesting time to be alive. But at the end of the day, like if you don't have the consistency and the discipline built in, you're going to spin your tires for a lot longer than you would if you did. And if you pair that with not having clarity, it's this cycle of reactive versus proactive.
I was actually venting about it on my Instagram story yesterday, where I usually update the story and like there's a little dashes because I update so often and I'm constantly throughout the day. But there were a couple of days, like anytime that there's just the plus sign because my story hasn't been updated in 24 hours, I'm like, something's weird with me right now. And I noticed it was just the plus sign. And I was sitting there in the field across the street where I live, throwing the ball with my dog, and she was just kind of calming down. And so I let her cool off out there so she doesn't drool in the house all over the floor, right? And so I was sitting there and I was just updating my story and I was kind of mellow. It was a long day and I was tired and my energy was definitely low. And I was just saying like, hey guys, so I haven't updated the story in a while. I've been kind of in that weird mood where I feel like I'm doing so much and like I'm spinning my tires and like things aren't working like I want them to, and deals that were supposed to go like fell through, and good leads just like ghosted me and whatnot. And it was one of those days where I kind of was just like, man, I'm just doing so much and I'm not feeling the results.
Yeah.
And like 2 or 3 people came back to me when I mentioned the part that I feel like I have an endless list of to-dos, right? Any high achiever, we all have a crazy list of to-dos that just never ends. We're just stacking on top of them. You think of a good idea, add 3 more bullet points to the endless to-do list, right? So what comes really handy is when, like you said, clarity, again, Pareto principle, like what is the key 20% tasks that you need to focus on that, according to your clarity and your goals, will move you forward, right? Yep. So knowing what to say no to is equally as important as knowing what to focus on.
Yeah.
With all the distractions that we have in our lives today.
Yeah. And when you decide what you want, you don't even have to decide what you say no to. It's either in alignment or it's not.
Right.
And Alan and I always use this example, and it's somewhat hardcore, I understand, but if I have the opportunity to get on a coaching call with David Meltzer, whose day-to-day life is my dream, or you want me to go play pickup football, I have to choose the coaching call with David Meltzer. And it goes back to when I decided I wanted to be the most successful podcaster, speaker, coach that I could be, the most successful in the world. That version of me is somewhere out there in the universe, and it's my job not to screw it up. If I go throw the pigskin around with you instead of doing the Dave call, I'm screwing that up. Now, that life isn't for everybody. And I understand that. I totally understand that. If you want to go play football and that lights you on fire, go do that. Go do that. But for me, that's just not the way it works. That's not what I want out of life. Again, I'll watch 5 hours of UFC. Not if I have an opportunity to get on the phone with a Dave or a Mark Metry or whatever. Then I DVR that,
Exactly.
It's the decisions. Like if you know your values, if you know your morals and you know your goals, your decision-making for you becomes very easy. If you're on a diet, your decision is easy. I don't want to eat this because it won't help me. I don't want to spend money on this because it won't help me, right? Like when you decide and you're clear, it kind of presents itself to you.
100%. And something else you said there, the coaching call versus it depends on what's important to you, right? So if someone is trying to become a varsity football player in high school and like that's what they want to do and they know that it's going to bring opportunities to get a scholarship in college, like by all means, you better go to that football practice because that is your thing. But if you realize like, hey, it's been cool, I like to play football, but it's more of like a hobby, I don't see myself doing that down the road, then yes, that coaching call. But we all have to figure out and identify like what is it to us that lights us up. And then I think the other thing, like the work-life balance part we talked about earlier, is knowing that, hey, when you have personal time with your girlfriend or your family or whatever, put the phone on face down, on silent, let the things go to voicemail. If it's important, they'll call you back or they'll leave a message or text you, because a lot of times we can get caught up in that. Me being in sales, like any phone call that is a local area code, like I send a lot of them to voicemail, or I text them back saying, hey, please leave a message if it's out of state, because a lot of spam calls and whatnot. But 9 p.m., 7 a.m., like Saturday, Sunday, anytime I see my phone and it's ringing and I'm with my family, it's like I'm tempted to answer it. But I've been consciously better at like, no, hey, right now I'm with my family, I'm eating dinner, like it can wait for 30 minutes and I'll call them back.
Yeah, I try to do that on Sundays. I consider Sunday a family day. And I've been slacking a little bit on that because things have been insane. We just moved into the studio, all that.
Slacking as in like you're working?
Yeah. I do some form of work every day, like part of my system of success. But I don't want to schedule any like outbound. Like I won't do other podcasts. I won't interview. I won't do any of that on Sunday. Sunday's family day, where if you do get to me, like I'm actually screwing up, honestly. And honestly, like that, I have screwed that up for the last couple of weeks just because it's been so much. But that it is that, like, I want a day where my girlfriend and I can just be like, that's what I want in 10 years. If I want that in 10 years, I want to try to find a way to do it now. Right. And am I leaving something on the table? Maybe, but I know it's not fulfillment because I'm getting
building your life the way you want it.
Right. Yeah. I don't want to wait. I don't want to say like when I hit X amount of dollars and clients, I'll take Sundays off. Like maybe it'll take me longer. And I always use the example of, when I was doing bodybuilding, I knew that if I had a cheat meal, the only person I was screwing was myself. Like my coach wouldn't know. Like he wouldn't know. If you decide that, you know what, today I want to do this instead of this, I am totally fine with that as long as you're aware of the downfalls of that. So if me taking Sundays, I'm going to lose $1 million over the course of my lifetime, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because I'll make up for it in love, in fulfillment, in memories, in connection. And I think there's always a give and take. When it's really scary, when you don't know what you're giving by taking. Like that's why awareness and hyperconscious is what we talk about. If you don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you don't know what you're giving up. You don't know what you're missing out on. You don't know, the benefits or the detriments. Like awareness and living intentionally. Like it's a completely different life if you just start one day doing that, even if it's one thing. If I said to you, the only thing that mattered from this entire episode, before you go to bed tonight, decide one thing you're going to do tomorrow. And one thing that will make you better. That's the start.
I think there's a quote from Martin Luther King, maybe he's the one who said it, MLK, that you don't have to see the whole staircase. You just have to see the first step.
Yep.
Believe that it's there or something like that. And it's super powerful. And I'm probably saying it wrong, but the quote's on there if you Google it, and the internet's real, right? I love quotes and going back to different quotes from people, but you just have to take the first step, put one foot in front of the other, and then knowing like where your goal is. Maybe you need to course correct a little bit. There may be some different flights of stairs as you climb this staircase of life, and that's okay, right? Goals change. Maybe you get to where you thought was the goal and you realize like, hey, this wasn't it. And you're finding that fulfillment along the way. So that's extremely powerful. I don't think money is like the thing either. And I mean, don't get me wrong. I have on my vision board, I was like, might as well throw Lambo up there in a private jet for good measure. But it's more of like the freedom and the lifestyle that I'm chasing. Like, I don't see the need of like, why would I need my personal jet right now? But why not take a personal jet or like private jet or charter a plane to fly to an event or something down the road, right? It's part of that freedom and that vision that I have for myself of living a life where I can do anything that I want, but I care more for the experiences than to have like the fancy garage,
Yeah.
But it's different for everyone. Like you mentioned earlier, someone may want that car, the Tai Lopez, the 4Ms, was it?
Mhm.
So someone may want the material stuff. They may want the car. Other people may be super happy just like becoming a yoga instructor
Right.
in studying in Bali and like teaching class out there.
Yeah. If you
So
can find something that you love doing, and I know you said Alan said that, like you don't really work, but like,
yeah,
it took me, I had the podcast for like 2 years before I made money.
yeah,
And I was still doing the same. I mean, I'm doing way more now, but I was still doing the same things. I was still talking in front of this thing. I was still talking to people. And it's like nothing changed except I started getting paid for it. And it's like, that's an amazing life. And the other thing too, and I know I'm harping on clarity, and I usually don't talk this much about it, believe it or not, but when I recorded episode number 7 of this show 2.5 years ago, whenever it was called Chase Your Effing Dreams, except effing wasn't edited out. And in that podcast, I said I wanted to wake up when I want. Like, this is my goal. My goal. I want to wake up when I want. I want to interview people and be on dope podcasts. I want to be able to go to the gym when I want and spend time with my loved ones whenever I want. That is my life today. Now, do I still have a ways to go? Yes. Like, I'm on stair 3 of 1,000. I have a long, long way to go, but that's progress.
But you're on you're on the flight of stairs.
Exactly. Now what happens if I say today, in 10 years, I want to be, living in California in a mansion. I want to have my own podcast studio like Joe Rogan. I want to have a charity that donates $25 million a year. Like, what happens if I start saying that today? Who knows what happens in 10 years? The stuff that you're doing today, the stuff that you're thinking today, the stuff that you're consuming today is either helping or hurting your future. And it's up to you to figure that out. And then it's up to you to start transitioning that. And then checking in, like you said, course corrections along the way. Like, am I going to, when I first got into the entrepreneurial game and quit my job, I was smoking weed at 11 o'clock on a Monday and thinking I was going to get my dreams. Like, I don't think it really works that way. So I had to course correct and say, like, with my current behavior, with my current effort, with my current specifics, will I get what I want? I had to say no. And then I had to make those changes. And I think everybody does that at some point or another. And it's that important, like, checking in, because if you don't, you'll end up getting the result that you don't want.
Yeah. And I think another way to do it is to wake up and say, what would the best version of myself that I'm trying to be do today? Like, would the best version of me do what I'm about to do? And when you don't have the clarity, you don't know. I mean, I still have those days. I saw on one of my Instagram archives, I was zooming in on like a journal for today, and it was like, WTH do I do today with a smiley face. I was sitting there at Starbucks. I had my coffee, like I ordered everything and I'm ready to be creative. I was like, I don't know what to do today. And there's some days now I've got the clarity where I'm like, okay, I want to engage with 30 people a day, at least, maybe more, on social media. I want to have a social media post. I want to spend an hour of learning. Like right now I'm going through Brendon Burchard's Experts Academy. So I like that you guys, I haven't been to any of the live events, but I do love the online content.
Yeah, he's really good.
And he really goes into clarity a lot. He's like, you have to commit, go all the way. You can't just dip your toe in. Like, don't kind of put up a blog and see how it goes. Like, commit to it and stick with it, right? So knowing the clarity and having your daily checklist, you're still going to have days where you're like, are these the right things? Like, and I've spent probably 2 weeks ago, I don't know how frequently you guys do this, if at all, but I'm trying to think, like, instead of just getting stuck on this hamster wheel of doing what I think I need to be doing, like, I want to do that bird's eye view every now and then and be like, okay, what am I doing? What am I struggling the most with? Is there an easier way to do this thing that's like, getting me stuck? And I just start drawing out on a blank piece of computer paper, and I implement new things into my systems, and I actually have huge breakthroughs that way, just from reflecting instead of being stuck in the business, like looking on the business.
Yeah. Reflection is so important. And just to touch on what you said about what would the best version of me do today? Yeah. I break it down to action by action. Like the other day, I tried to shoot the paper towel into the trash and I missed. It went behind it. And I'm like,
you wanted to leave it. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And I said, what would the best version of Kevin do? Like he'd leave that for somebody else. Like, come on, so it's that level of ownership too. Like, be proud of the action you're taking. Like, what would the best version of me do? Like, would they go up to that person and introduce themselves, even though it's terrifying? Yes, they would. They would. Would they stop and help that person? Yes, they would. Like, again, it's like the morals and the values. Like, what would the best version of me do? when you have an idea of what you think the best version of you would do, anytime you step away from that, you're stepping away from congruence. You're leaving your goals on the table. That's what you're doing. And I put myself in pain. I don't suggest everybody do that. But like when people say, what keeps you motivated or hungry? Either I do this or I don't get what I want. Unfortunately, or fortunately, because it's going to make me, have to become an incredible man. But that is the way it's set up. Like there's a reason the people who work the hardest, the smartest, the longest, and lead with their heart, they're successful because that's the way this game is set up. And either
Absolutely.
I do that or I don't get what I want. And at the end of the day, I'm grateful for that because, that's what separates me from the old version of me.
I love listening to some of the motivational clips and audios from Jocko and Goggins, right?
Yep.
Because it's such a twisted view of like what most people say, where they say like embrace the dark side, like whenever you have the pain, like relish it, like enjoy it. And so like even with cold showers, I don't know if you guys probably take cold showers and all that too.
Not anymore. I did.
You did? So
Yeah.
I take a nice hot shower to like enjoy it, and especially after a workout, but like I do the first minute like really cold, but it's not even uncomfortable anymore. At first I was like, man, I don't want to get in, and I'd be waiting. And now I kind of like just think of like Goggins or Jocko, and I'm like, no, this is easy. And whenever I want to count down from 3, I'm just like 3, and I just jump in. I'm like, I'm going to shock myself and just do things that make me uncomfortable until it becomes comfortable. It's like nothing, you turn the cold water and you jump in. Same thing with public speaking. Before you might be like, I'm not ready, I'm not prepared, I don't have my note cards. And now you're just like, all right, do like a little Tony Robbins jumping jacks or whatever he does to hype himself up. And then you're there in front of 20, 30 people, 1,000 people. I don't know how big of groups you guys have spoken in front of yet, but I can only imagine being on like Brendan's level or Tony Robbins' level.
Yeah.
Or
I still get scared though. I still get scared. Like
and it's okay to be scared, right? Yeah.
I'm terrified, man. I don't
but
sleep.
But you do it.
Oh yeah, I have to though.
Yeah.
I have. And that's the thing. Like, honestly, I was a little nervous before getting on this. Like I am.
It just happens.
It's part of the game.
You guys recently interviewed like Dean Graziosi, right? I just interviewed him as well recently. Nice. And usually I'm like, especially if I know the person I'm about to talk to, it's like, oh, it's just a conversation. It's cool. But for some reason, when I interviewed some like larger players, I'm like, whoa, like I've read this guy's book. I've listened to him for years, and he's about to be on my show. Right. Like, and they're so on top of it. They have their answers so dialed in, and I'm still developing my interviewing skills where I'm like, I want to make sure I ask good questions and I don't sound like an idiot because they're ready to go. Like, what's the next question? And I'm like, crap, like I don't know what to ask next. I should have like written some questions down. But it comes with practice. And a lot of times, even when you're nervous or you're unsure of yourself, people can't notice that all the time.
Right.
I mean, unless you're really quivering in your voice, people are like, I didn't even know you were nervous. Like you were nervous when you were talking to Dean. I'm like, yeah, like you didn't hear the little nervous chuckle. Or like, I thought that was just how you sound.
I screwed up the intro with Dean. Like literally, I do the intro live, like, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And when I was going through his accolades, I just like missed one and I was like, oh my God.
Or you like say the name wrong or something.
I've done that. Brant Pinvidic. Yeah. I said Brant Pindivic. Like I pronounced his name wrong. And then we had to do the entire, like, here's what it, at the end of the day.
Just roll with the punches. Yeah.
Yeah. What else are you going to do? And honestly, the fact that I get the chance to interview somebody like that, that's the thing anyway. Like it is what it is. Everybody screws up. It's part of the game. If you're not screwing up, you're not trying hard. Or you're way beyond or below the level that you could be at. Like you should be screwing up.
And some people get so good, like Brendan, when you're looking at his stuff, it seems like he's so good at speaking extemporaneously. And then there's other people where they really have to do more preparation, or they're still at that beginner level where they can't just roll with the punches. But it comes with practice. As you make 1,000 videos, as you do 5,000 videos, like you're going to get better.
Right.
So
you just got to hang in there. It's got to be something you love enough to hang in there through the suck.
Yeah. My girlfriend was asking me, one of her, she works at a CPA firm and somebody wants to start a podcast, one of the CPA partners. And she was like, how much time does it take you to do a podcast a week? Like so-and-so is thinking about starting one. And I was like, well, at first it took me like an hour to do a 20-minute episode because I would type notes and do this and that. And now it's like, oh, it just takes me this hour that we're talking. And then I outsource it. My VA makes sure everything's clean, sends it back to me. I come up with the title and a description and it's good to go. Right. So it's a process because I think I'm not quite up to your level yet. I'm almost to like 190-ish episodes right now. And I upped it from 1 to 2 a week, but I've gotten faster. I've iterated. If there's a little bit of imperfection or I mess up, whatever, let it roll. No one's going to really care.
Right.
Yeah. Well, hey, I know we're at the end of the hour here and I want to be respectful of your time. So what's the key takeaway that you want our audience to have today, Kevin?
Oh, the biggest difference between
Clarity.
the person, well, that, yeah. But the biggest difference between the person you are and the person you want to be is your habits. The stuff you do every single day. The days make up the weeks, that make up the months, that make up the years of your life. So if you start doing something different today, that can change your life if you do it long enough.
That's powerful. Another motivational clip I heard, it's Gary Vee saying every second has to count. Like he says it 3 times because we just don't have as many as we think.
Right.
So true.
So true.
So you really have to make every day count because that rolls into the weeks, the months, the years. Then you're 70 years old and you're like, crap, what did I do with my life? Right.
And clarity.
And clarity. That's another takeaway. Very important. And Kevin, where can our audience go to connect with you, to reach you, check out your podcast?
Yeah, so you can search us anywhere you watch or listen to podcasts. We're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, SoundCloud, all the things. Just search the Hyperconscious Podcast. We just had our website rebuilt, so the hyperconsciouspodcast.com. And I'm doing free 30-minute consultations with podcasters. If you have a show, if you want a show, if you're trying to grow your show, monetize your show, get better guests, ask better questions, I just do free consultations, no strings attached. Just email me at kevin@thehyperconsciouspodcast.com. We'll set it up, and I promise I won't say clarity for everything you need to do.
The answer is clarity. Are you clear with your goals? But even if you did say that, that would be the right answer. So
true. Yeah, it's true. That's good.
Well, hey, Kevin, it was awesome having you on the show and getting to connect with you, especially like within a day of talking to your co-host of the Hyperconscious Podcast. So I definitely appreciate having you on and seeing your different, personalities and similar things that we all talk about. If we're in the space, we all have things that we're kind of on a similar path, but there's different things that we can learn from each other every single day. So I'll be sure to link up all the resources in your email in the show notes, and I'll let you know once this goes live.
Right on, my man. Chris, thank you so much. Great interview. I appreciate you very much. And yes,
likewise.
I hope I inspired.
Yes, you did.